The judges ready? And the timer. All right. He sat in the back row every week, his arms and legs crossed and his head tipped down, his dyed black hair falling into his eyes. I made many new friends when I started youth group 2 years ago, but the lonely young man in the back row was the one I thought about during the week, the one that God seemed to keep reminding me of. I think it was because of the way the other students treated him, not with revulsion or distaste, but with total indifference. Although they ignored him, they did have a name for him, the emo kid. So what is an emo? How are these kids typically treated by others? And what can we do to reach out to them? First off, let's define emo. Despite what it sounds like, the word emo is not an acronym. It is in fact a shortened form of the word emotional. Most people think emo are depressed kids that are just overdramatic. But according to teendepression.org, a site that provides support for the families of depressed teens, depression in teens occurs for a number of reasons, varying from adolescent to adolescent. The number one causes, however, include a traumatic experience, such as moving, changing schools, a divorce, or a job loss at home, feelings of being unloved or uncared for, teasing by peers, and feeling like they don't belong in any social atmosphere. Also, according to clinical psychologist Dr. Joseph M. Carver, a depressed and alienated teen often slips into an emo or gothic subculture, finding other teens that are also depressed, confused, distressed, and alienated. He goes on to say that, sadly, the type of emotional support provided by these groups actually prolongs emotional misery by encouraging further alienation. So, emos are depressed, but with good reason. Another term people often associate with this group is cutter. Cutting is a term used when an adolescent takes out their emotional pain on their body by cutting their arms, legs, and other parts of the body with a sharp object. However, most psychiatrists say that emo patients, contrary to popular belief, do not cut themselves. It is usually only a last resort when the feelings of being unloved or uncared for continue. So, why does this all matter to me? Well, let me tell you about my best friend, Megan. Megan wears short pleated skirts, low-cut t-shirts, black Converse, and dark makeup. She is what most people would call emo. I met Megan at a basketball game. She was guarding me, and we already stood out as the only 11-year-olds that were 5'6". But Megan stood out even more with her dyed hair. Megan colors her hair black and white, and initially, I didn't know what to think of her. Every time we played Megan's team, the girls on my team would whisper mean things, and the parents would stare in disgust. Even I thought she looked unapproachable. So I see where people are coming from when they say, emos are scary. I didn't see Megan again for some time, until that fateful piano recital. I was taken aback when I saw her. I hadn't even known we had the same piano teacher. I was actually rather upset to see her. Megan instantly recognized me, though, and started talking to me. So I had to reluctantly sit down next to her and start talking to her, too. However, it turned out we weren't all that different. In fact, we had a lot in common. After that, we quickly became best friends. One week, I invited Megan to church, but she was very reluctant and kept making excuses. After much coaxing and convincing, she finally agreed to attend. As soon as we got to the youth room, I could see why Megan had been so reluctant. The kids all treated her as if she didn't exist, and if she did approach them, they acted like she had the Black Plague, and they would catch it if they talked to her. All I could think was, wow, what happened to Matthew 7:1-2? Stop judging others, and you will not be judged, for others will treat you as you treat them. Clearly, the kids needed to take this verse to heart. Megan hated this experience and went home saying Christians were mean and over-opinionated. So why would she want that? It would require her to give up herself, her identity, because she wasn't anything like religious people and thought she could never fit in as she was. I had to accept this, and simply became her only real friend instead of her only church friend. Megan and I did many things together, and I would constantly try to take her to church events. But after many terrible experiences, she began refusing me, so I had to subtly mention my faith to her. Then, last September, the hardest thing I've ever been through happened. I moved here, to California, away from all of my friends. Once here in California, I found myself lost. And back in Minnesota, Megan was experiencing the same problems. But she didn't have God to help her, where I had him to help me through this tough time. Megan quickly went downhill. She became lonely, depressed, and lost interest in a lot of things. She was quickly going down a path I didn't want to lose her to. I tried to encourage Megan, and I sent her books that I thought would help her. I urged her to attend a church close to her house that I knew had a good youth group that wouldn't judge her. All of this was to no avail. And Megan began diving into relationships to try and fill the void that had always been there, but that she now felt more deeply. With a difficult family life and now a difficult relationship, my friend's life was quickly becoming harder and harder for her to figure out. Then, one night, after she had had a terrible day, we were talking on the phone, and she was saying she was ugly, unloved, hated, and a burden to everyone around her. I told her no, I cared. God cared, and he wanted to be there for her. But she started arguing, saying, I'm not like church kids. How could their God love someone like me? And I realized that she truly believed if she wasn't like the people that went to church, God wouldn't love her. I told her God didn't care what she looked like or what her preferences and things were. He loved her for the unique person he had made her to be. I told her about the Bible's message and about Jesus' sacrifice. And as she really listened for the first time, it dawned on her. When she was at her lowest, she was finally open to what I had been telling her for some time. She understood that God really did love everyone, and he didn't have the biased view she had experienced with so many others. And so, after some time, Megan prayed to accept Jesus, and her life is looking up now. She has a better outlook on life, and the negative way she used to talk is starting to become a thing of the past. They are subtle differences, but she's beginning to change from the inside out. And it's for these small changes that I'm so glad I stepped out of my comfort zone and got to know Megan, and then told her about the one person that will always be there for her. Now that you know how my friend felt when she attended church, you might be wondering how we as the church can do more for this group. One step you can take is to bring this message back to your youth leaders and encourage them to share it with the kids in their church. We shouldn't view emos as hopeless souls. We should look at them as pre-Christians, people who could contribute gifts and talents to the church. We need to get this message out and get some of these kids to churches that will welcome and love them. Another way to reach them is through their interests. Poetry, art, and music are three of their passions. Emos especially like a Japanese art style called anime. This art style is wildly popular with them, and is a fast-growing subculture for teenagers in general. These are all ways the church could reach out to them, perhaps by holding after-school art programs that they could invite emos to. Most importantly, as we learned earlier, emos are children who are depressed for good reason. They aren't just being over-dramatic. They feel like they don't belong. So the most significant step you can take is to just accept them. You don't have to agree with the way that they dress or the things that they do, but you don't have to go out of your way to avoid them either. Just talk to them. We need to remember it isn't our job to change them. It's our job to love them where they're at, and the rest is up to God. Emos are no different than anyone else. They want to feel like they matter. So I challenge you, make the effort to befriend people like these that you may have been avoiding. In order for us to influence the lost, we need to get close to them. The body of Christ must step outside of the safety net of familiarity and go to these kids that really need it. Trust me, it's worth it. Thank you.